Hey, everybody. David Amado here, music director of the Atlanta Classical Orchestra, and I am thrilled to introduce to all of you our soloist for our third Masterworks series, playing the Hummel Trumpet Concerto, Ansel Norris. Hey, Ansel.
Hello, David. Good to see you.
Likewise, good to see you and good to meet you. We have not met, which is,
Yes.
I think, awesome. So thank you for agreeing to come and play Hummel Concerto with us. I think that'll be a lot of fun. And I'm looking forward to, making music. I'm also looking forward to meeting you and hanging out. So I'd love if you could just share with us your kind of a little bit about you, but and I think a little bit about you aimed at, in the end, the Hummel Concerto, like how you came to your first experiences were with it. Because I have to, full disclosure, I should have taken it out before I started the interview, but under the piano there in the corner, in a case, very, very inaccessible, are my trumpets.
Oh my goodness.
They've been there for years.
I thought you studied piano.
I did. So piano
You've been hiding. You've been holding out on me.
But so I have a real soft spot for the trumpet and for trumpet literature. I spent a lot of time trying to play it, mostly unsuccessfully.
It happens to all of us.
So yeah, tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I grew up in Madison. I started when I was very young, 4 years old, playing violin, Suzuki violin. And I had no interest in practicing, and my mom had no patience for paying for lessons when I had no interest in practicing. So I only played for a few years, but it was tremendously influential because the program, has little children singing along to melodies and learning music by ear, which is just, as you know, a tremendously valuable skill.
Right.
And I think especially when it comes to playing brass instruments or singing or things like this, where you don't have a sort of visual pitch reference, where you sort of just have to pick notes out of thin air, because I think it helped me when I did pick up the trumpet in sixth grade, learn rather quickly just the basic feeling of the instrument and how to produce melodies and songs and things that I knew already. And I got sort of bitten by the trumpet a little bit in about seventh grade, I want to say. Sixth grade, I sort of, was okay with it. Seventh grade, I started bringing it home and annoying my neighbors. And I had my first teacher in ninth grade, and had some wonderful experiences at the Interlochen Arts Camp. Had a tremendous teacher named John Ailey, who was the longtime professor at University of Wisconsin-Madison, and one of the former trumpeters from the American Brass Quintet. So he's a tremendous soloist and chamber musician. And so he had me playing great solo music, from the earliest times we worked together. And it was extremely important. And a lot of people who play the trumpet classically are quickly align themselves in the direction of attaining a position in the orchestra, as I, eventually did. But I was very lucky that I had a teacher that was very interested in solo repertoire and was encouraging of me to pursue competitions and these sorts of things to hopefully eventually be in the position like, I can be in today, to come and join you guys as a soloist. So after high school, I went to Northwestern University and I studied with the great husband and wife trumpet teaching dynasty, Barbara Butler and Charlie Geyer, who have a career spanning, I guess, almost 50 years teaching and performing at a very high level. So I was there for 4 years, and then I went to the New World Symphony in South Beach. So that was my first taste of. I was there from 2016 to 18.
Okay.
And that was my first taste of the salt life. And after that, I went for a year and rejoined my teachers, Barbara and Charlie, at their new position at Rice University. And I was able to win a position that fall in Naples, where I met Brian Stanley. who
Yeah.
is one of the original reasons why we've gotten connected. And fast forward through COVID times. It's like, so just fast forward through that, forget it ever happened, sort of. But I came up here to be with my partner Natalie, because, as you know, nobody had any obligation to be anywhere performing, so I had the freedom to go to St. Pete, and I loved it here, and I made some really close friends, and started performing with the orchestra a little bit, and was able to win my position here, associate principal, in the Florida Orchestra, which has been a tremendous blessing. And one thing I should say is, through the years, I've done a lot of solo competitions, and that was sort of the other side of this coin. Once I went to study with the teachers at Northwestern, that was very focused on playing in an orchestra. But the whole time, I was also pursuing my separate, the other part of me, which is to play as a soloist. And so I have a number of competitions on my belt, and hard-won awards. And I can say, some people have asked me in the past, why should I do competitions? Why are they worth it? Because obviously they put every performer in a very vulnerable place, to be sort of publicly judged for their life's work, which is a precarious thing for any young person. And I would say the reason why I'm glad that I did them, even though they were at times compromising and difficult, is because of opportunities like this that I hope to get one day. Because especially a few years ago, when I went to Russia and participated in the Tchaikovsky competition, which was sort of an unexpected thing. It was the first year that they ever included the brass instruments, and I was not sure if I would be accepted. And I sort of sent my stuff in hoping for the best, but it was really good that I did that, because it's produced a lot of opportunities to just have a more individual voice as a musician, and to be sort of a little bit more creative and a little bit more of a bigger part of myself in the experience of performing than is playing in an orchestra, which is equally fulfilling, but that's more about fitting neatly into the machine of the community. And this is, for me, equally important and wonderful. So as it comes to the Hummel Concerto, we first met perhaps 14 years old. I first started studying it seriously when I was 17. But it's melody, especially the last movement, the melody, which is one of the core melodies of the trumpet, right? It's sort of one of the ones you hear the earliest. And I started studying it seriously when I was 17. I played it first time with an orchestra that year. And this is actually going to be my fifth time.
Wonderful. And you get
Which
to do it
is
4 times. So it'll be your 6th,
Yeah.
7th, 9th time.
Right. No, it's very interesting. And I'm glad that you asked me to do it, because there's infinite layers of complexity with any piece, and especially one where, I'm the soloist and I have so much of I have to carry so much of the proverbial load of the music, because I just think any solo piece, and especially one that's so great and so storied, benefits from maturity, and all of those previous times will make it so much easier just to fall into it and understand basically how things will go, and try to adapt creatively to the circumstances that we have together. And so there's a lot I could go into with this piece, because it's obviously it's a seed.
It's a seminal piece, right? I mean,
it's a seminal piece. Yeah, it's a seed that grew into the modern trumpet in a way.
Right. And one of the things that I think is so kind of interesting in thinking about the piece is to realize in a lot of ways that the world that's written for the same guy, right? Those worlds were so sort of instantly different from trumpet expectations like the year before.
Yeah.
Like suddenly something changed. Like it was not really a slow evolution. It was just a kind of a sort of, here we are, like the butterfly emerging from the cocoon. And that it's kind of amazing. The rest of the language is not the trumpet to kind of have that lead role that I think is sort of shocking.
Yeah, I was thinking about this last week. This, in a sense, it's not so different from any new technology that comes out, like a GPS or something like this. That, for example, my mom still doesn't use GPS unless it's absolutely necessary. She's not really particularly interested in using it because she knows how to use a map. She knows how to use a map. She knows how to use her memory. These things. I think that the trumpet's evolution was taken a bit this way because this man, the man who invented the keyed trumpet for which this piece was written, Anton Weidinger, was an inventor. He was a trumpeter and he was an inventor. In his free time, he was in his garage coming up with kooky ideas. That's his life, and he was performing as a trumpet player. And in the time, it was an important enough achievement that he was invited to present his instrument to the Viennese court. And I'm trying to think of this happening today. It's like, check out my new trumpet, guys.
Yeah.
But there were it wasn't something that instantly caught people's attention. For example, I mean, Beethoven and Brahms, for a long time afterward, composed for the original instrument. It wasn't like it was something that everybody immediately considered superior. It was something that people sort of regarded with a little bit of suspicion and hesitancy, or didn't know about at all. That's the sort of thing. It's like like any technology.
But you mentioned Beethoven and Brahms, and you're exactly right. But I think it's important to remember that Brahms was even later, and Brahms was so fundamentally conservative.
Yes.
That trumpets were natural trumpets, horns were the natural. I mean, maybe we should take just a quick second and I'm hoping my internet connection stays stable because it keeps glitching in and out. But just take a quick second to remind everybody what trumpets had been capable of before the invention of this totally chromatic keyed trumpet of Weidinger.
Sure. Previously the trumpet was just a long metal tube with no valves or anything. So it was essentially forced to obey the laws of physics. And the way the laws of physics work with harmonics is there's a fundamental note, and then the next note is an octave higher. So there's nothing in between those two notes. And then the next note is a fifth, and the next note is a major third. Is that right? And the next note's a minor third. So it goes ba, 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 da, 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 da. So as you go higher and higher, the notes get closer together.
Right.
So the trumpet was essentially, if it wanted to do anything melodic, was forced to play in the extreme upper register, because that was the only place you could play any sort of scale.
Right.
So before the keyed trumpet, the trumpet was a high instrument only. It was known as a heralding, clear, piercing sound to announce the presence of the gods, or announce the war, or bring in the troops, or anything like this. It was like a very
or the arrival of the mail.
the arrival of the mail, the post horn. It was a very distinctive instrument. It was like an alarm bell, and the idea of that alarm bell having any sort of melodic soloistic presence was absurd, because that, I mean, even though some people did it well, like Handel or Bach, or they wrote beautiful things for it, but the problem is they're tremendously difficult to play because they're such in the upper register of the instrument that
Just a quick to remind everybody that's watching and listening that, you know, we still talk about clarion calls.
yes,
Clarion that's the same word as clarino, which is the Italian word for those
for those
trumpets.
instruments. Yeah, right. And so the keys that Weidinger put on the trumpet actually are closer to a saxophone than a trumpet, modern trumpet, in terms of how the mechanics are. So there are a bunch of keys, and they sort of, there are modern ones that have 3 keys, and then they have all these little holes that they open all around along the instrument, similar to a saxophone. And it was a cumbersome instrument, and you can hear some masters today play it, and I mean, people of tremendous skill who play modern trumpets as well, and even when they play it, you can still hear there's something uncomfortable in it.
Right.
It's,
Well, you know what Mendelssohn said about the instrument? Do you know this great
what did he
quote?
say?
He said, listening to Weidinger's trumpet is like looking at a beautiful woman with a beard.
It's like, wow. Which at the time was unthinkable. And of course, this instrument, that's why I like to draw this parallel to any sort of new technology that comes out now, because people receive this trumpet the same way then that people receive any technology now. It's like all the kids who see it are like, oh, that's so cool, let's all try it. And all the older people who are used to their things are saying, oh, why do we need that? That's not going to improve our situation. Or I'm not interested in that. And
Right.
it's the same as any technology. It seems funny to think of it this way, because it's because of this invention that the trumpet became, that Miles Davis was possible, that Louis Armstrong was possible.
Right.
You know, that the people who sowed the seeds for American popular music, some of whom were trumpeters, none of them would have existed. It's like that. Miles Davis would have played the double bass or something. You know?
Right.
And so
no, exactly right.
It's funny to think of it as a sort of, you can imagine like the novelty of it was sort of regarded with discomfort.
Yeah. Well,
but it was a great opportunity for Hummel and Haydn.
Yeah.
Because they got I don't think either one of them necessarily was convinced of its worth, but I do think that they saw a good opportunity to make some money, and they're very, very talented, and we're all the more lucky for it.
Yeah, no, yeah, you're right. I mean, one of the things that I think is really interesting for me, just sort of viewing this piece in the place that it was written, you know, like right at the turn of the 19th century, and to think about what, for me, as a, you know, sort of worst case scenario, as just like a listener of music, like go to a concert and I listen to a symphony of Haydn or Mozart or an early Beethoven symphony, and I think about what the trumpet together with the timpani, because they're always paired together, right, in those classical works, what they mean to my orientation in the work, right? So because trumpets could only play a certain set of notes, trumpets were really, like the drums, also could only play a couple of notes without just sort of cumbersome tuning, and trumpets also
right,
switching stuff out. So, you know, in the course of a movement, they were just going to play a handful of notes, and those notes were the sort of, they were the defining tonality of the piece. And so it's a kind of a quick cheat that if you're listening to a piece of that era that has trumpets and drums, that when the trumpets and drums play, you know, for example, that you're in the recapitulation. You understand if there's a false recapitulation in the wrong key and the trumpets and drums aren't there, that it's a false recapitulation, right? I'm sure Haydn's got an example somewhere where there's a true recapitulation and the trumpets and drums intentionally don't play to confuse people who, like me, who are listening, expecting to hear them. So I think that, like in the slow movement of the Hummel, when things modulate just all over the place, and the trumpet continues to participate, there's this, it's kind of breathtaking.
yeah.
You know, now we hear it, it's like, oh yeah, it's a beautiful tune and there are modulations, and right, great, that's the way music works. But to look at it to look at it without hindsight, to understand that this was completely unexplored territory, is kind of, I mean, it's shocking and breathtaking. I mean, it's just the idea that those things happen in that piece.
I mean, you even think of the opening figure of the piece, right? Da 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 dum, bum, ba-dum, perfectly possible on the previous instrument.
Right.
But then, ba 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 bum, suddenly we're somewhere completely new, completely fresh, and it's deliberately shocking. And you hear these stories of in the Haydn Trumpet Concerto, he wrote in these little figures for the instrument to play before the initial melody. Like the orchestra's playing along, introducing the piece, and the trumpet has these little interjections into the texture, and they're sometimes played in modern times and sometimes they're not. But those figures are, again, perfectly playable on the instrument. And you know Haydn, famous for his sense of humor, and so he was attempting to make a joke to the audience, saying, "Oh, you came to hear this new trumpet, but it's actually just the old trumpet." Right. But then the first phrase of the piece, bum bum bum, the second note wasn't possible before. Right. And so you think, oh, why did I pay for this? And then you hear this note. Oh, it's like, that's this.
Right.
I know it's sort of silly to think about this now because there's so many, it's silly to think about that being shocking because there's so many, we have infinite accessibility to, new information now. Right. But the fact is that wasn't the case then, and for that to happen was like the most interesting thing in somebody's week.
Right.
That this trumpet played this new note.
That's why I've programmed these Haydn and Mozart symphonies around it in order to make an effort to sort of contextualize the Hummel and make it feel hopefully progressive, because it really was. Because the Haydn 90 and Mozart Linz both have trumpets. They're both in plain old C major. They and trumpets do exactly what you'd expect them to do in the C major together with the timpani. Then we get to the Hummel and it's like, whoa, what?
It's crazy to think about this in a historical context. This piece was written 18 years after the founding of our country or something. 18 years? It's 1794, right? Is that?
Yeah, I thought, I don't, right around there.
Or is that the year the instrument was invented? It's one of these dates.
I think the piece was from like 1802 or something.
Okay, so maybe the instrument was invented 1794. So the instrument is invented shortly after our country is founded. And now here we are, 2023, playing this music in this country that was founded only shortly after this instrument was invented. But now we have a modern version of this instrument that's tremendously more capable. And we're playing this European music that's hundreds of years old. I'm thinking of this person inventing this instrument and imagining someday in some relatively uncharted land, some person is going to be playing some way more advanced version of this instrument, and they're still going to be playing this piece. It's just a remarkable thing. And the evolution of the instrument has allowed for so many more possibilities, because we can do tempos and we can explore colors, and there's possibilities of articulation that are just far beyond what was possible on the original instrument. It would be so wonderful for Hummel to hear it. Yeah. Because I would guess, based on some context clues, that he didn't think this piece was going to be anything, or this instrument was going to be anything.
Right. That's probably true, which is why people like Beethoven continued to just, he would rather have that sense of sort of architectural orientation associated with brass instruments, and Brahms too, than have these oddball, this keyed instrument with this fuzzy sounds on a lot of the overtones. And it's like, he didn't want that.
It just wasn't that interesting for them, I don't think. They were just sort of like, oh, okay, that's cool, you did that.
But what's funny to me is that when you look at the horn, the natural horn has a long history of being fully chromatic with all the hand stuff.
Right.
And, Beethoven, for one, and Brahms also, like valved horns were a thing with Brahms, but he still wrote, his music is conceived of as natural horn music. But both Beethoven, who wrote pretty much exclusively for natural horn, has all of this music where it's chromatic, all of this music that's scalar, all this music that rely. I love, for example, in the Roca Symphony, in the Scherzo, in the repeat of the trio, you know, that the big horn moment, that where the harmony change coordinates with the color change you would get from stuffing your hand in the instrument to get those pitches. You know, that Beethoven thought of that. Those two things were inseparable with him. Yet with the trumpet, because, you know, you can't really stick your hand in the bell and modify the sound, you know, there was just this, like, people didn't want the color variations.
I was just thinking about the Ode to Joy. We played that here last year, the Ninth Symphony. And in order for that melody to be possible, so it's actually just 5 notes range. It's a perfect fifth range, this whole melody. Except for when it goes bum, 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 bum. But in order for that melody to be possible, you'd have to play a trumpet in the key of D with a very long, it had to be pitched an octave lower than the trumpets we play now, because that's the only way that those pitches would be possible to play in a scale. And they wouldn't, the intonation would be dreadful.
Yeah.
That's the thing. You're doing so much manipulation to try to get these pitches, because the laws of physics, the harmonic series falls in a way that is not in tune like a piano. It's not you know, even tempered. There are pitch tendencies in every one, so you sort of have to, in order to get it to sound like an intonation, to sound like any sort of intonation, you'd have to do a lot of things with your body, you know. And it's so interesting to think that now we've freed ourselves somehow from that. And of course there are other things that are lost. I think what you're saying about the color changes, if you're not aware of that, I should say it's good to be aware of that, because it can influence how you will play, even if your instrument doesn't demand it. Like if you don't have to put your hand in the bell. So for people who don't know about what David means by the hand stuff with the natural horn, the French horn, your hand goes in the bell like this just to hold the instrument up. And if you hold it open this way, just sort of like that, then you'll get a natural pitch, but you can change the angle of your hand like this. And it not only covers the sound, it also changes the pitch. You can make the note sharper or flatter depending on how you put your hand. And so people do all sorts of tricks to get all these notes out that otherwise, if you just left it open, wouldn't be possible. And like the trumpet, if you wanted to do that, you'd have your hand all the way out in the next county.
Right. But, you know, there's, you know, with the hand stopping stuff, there are so many just great moments. And I think, you know, Beethoven in particular, like in the Seventh Symphony, that second horn part,
oh yeah, right.
Wop 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 wop. It's just great. It's
I love
that. That's what he meant. And so it's just funny to me that composers weren't, I guess the instrument, the new keyed trumpet was not sufficiently standardized. I mean, the advantage of a natural horn is that it's just a natural horn. It's just a tube with blow in one end, sound comes out the other. You know, this instrument was a you know, like you've said, it was a piece of technology, you know, had all this.
Ooh.
And so it wasn't like everybody had one, everyone had access to it. So that made
not for a while.
Right.
And then once piston valves and rotary valves started coming out, it was made obsolete fairly quickly.
Right.
But then that opened up a whole, I mean, I like the story of Berlioz going to see a concert by a famed cornet soloist who is one of the founding fathers of the modern instrument, Jean-Baptiste Arban. And he was so stunned by the things he heard in this concert that he went home to rewrite Symphonie Fantastique, because he had no idea what was possible.
I love that. I love that waltz with the cornet stuff.
It's so gorgeous. I love it too.
Yeah. That's, I always, I love to do it with that. It's always the question, with or without. I'm like, oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes it's. I remember when I was at Tanglewood and I was doing this piece with Stefan Deneve, and I went to him and I said, please, I would love to play this solo. And he said, he sort of looked at me, you know, why would you want to play it? I said, it is one of the most beautiful things that exists for our instrument, and I don't want to miss this opportunity. And he made me come to his room and play it for him to see if the way I played it would be okay for his vision. And thankfully we agreed.
Good. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. Well, the Hummel is also one of the most beautiful things for the instrument. And
Yes,
I'm completely delighted that you're going to be joining us. And it's
I'm
going to
delighted to join you.
be a lot of fun. It's I think it's just such a wonderful opportunity, among other things, and in the most simple sense, to be able to take an instrument which is so often relegated to the back of the stage and put it out front, and let
Summon
everybody
it to the
know.
front.
Yeah. So thank you, and thank you for joining me for this lovely conversation. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And
Looking forward to it very much.
me too. And we'll be seeing you soon.
All right.
Thanks, Ansel. Take care.
Bye, David.